Good morning. Good morning, and welcome to the June 3rd, 2026 informal session of the Savannah-Chatham County Public School System Board of Education. That's a lot to say. This is information only. We do not take any votes during this meeting, but I'm glad to see so many people out today, and I hope there are a lot of people watching. So we will begin today with our strategic priority and efficient, effective, and equitable resource stewardship. Wow, that's a lot to say. All right. And we'll start with our quarterly change order report.
Good morning. We have the quarterly change order report for the first quarter of 26 through January to March for all the change orders. You have already had the change orders that are over $50,000. You've have approved those, and those also listed here. The first page of these change orders are pretty much all associated with the Port Wentworth Annex project. Human Resources and Academic Affairs moved over there, and Campus Police had moved around in certain other areas in it. And so these change orders are mostly related to accommodate those moves and also to take care of some safety issues. Oops. The second page is changes resulting mostly over at Islands High School in the construction of the athletic field expansion work. Many of those change orders are related to field coordination, unforeseen conditions, and of course that soil corrective work. And then there's a couple of miscellaneous changes on the third page. So with that, I will take any questions regarding any change orders.
Ms. Hall?
This is really more for Dr. Watts than for you, but I just wonder, when we're doing all of these renovations and corrections when schools are not populated, what is our security there? People in and out, doors open all day, especially like, say, Islands High School. What do we have in place to make sure that, you know, things are not going missing or?
I actually think that's a better question for our campus police, but the buildings are still armed. There are people there that work at the school that are still monitoring people in and out, but not the same level of security when students are in place. No, I wouldn't say that. I don't know if anybody is here from campus police yet.
So,
Not yet.
not yet.
But I'll get a detailed answer of what's in place and get it to you.
Not, you know,
In writing,
just
yes.
as an assurance that everything is covered.
Yes.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right.
That was like a half a second.
Now we have our update on our strategic, I got to say that word a lot today, too. Strategic
is the word
plan.
of the day. Absolutely. And before Ms. Taylor starts, I'll just say today marks an important moment for the Savannah-Chatham County Public School System as we present the final draft of our 2026-31 strategic plan, Unlimited Possibilities. And I just want to begin by expressing how proud I am of this plan. I feel like I have given birth to a third child. It's been a whole year in the making. This document is a statement of our belief in our students, our schools, and our employees and the future of this community. It reflects thoughtful engagement, honest feedback of many, many stakeholders, and most importantly, our shared aspiration. Students, families, educators, school and district leaders, civic partners, and community members all gave their time, their voice, and their perspective, and they helped us not only name our strengths, but also confront the things that we need to improve and sharpened our focus on what matters most. We are excited to release this plan. The title is Unlimited Possibilities. It's a bold plan, but it's also deeply intentional. And it reminds us that every day, and I hope it's an everyday reminder of this plan, that we help students graduate, not just to graduate, but to ensure they graduate future ready. I'm grateful for the board for its continued leadership, to the community, to our parents, and to our students. And this plan will give us all now new direction, more intentional direction as we move forward. But the interesting thing is while I am so excited about the launch of the plan, the implementation is now the pivot, the execution of the plan is now the pivot that we have to make, and that will require discipline, alignment, and a shared accountability. So, as I invite Deputy Superintendent Dr. Stacy Taylor to present, I just want to end by saying together we can ensure that unlimited possibilities are not just words on a plan, but they become the lived experience of the students we serve every day, and I'm really excited about that.
Ms. Hall?
I'm a little jealous, all these beautiful pictures in here, but I do see on the last page, I made it, Mr. Moss, Dr. Howard Hall, and I thought there was one other board member. Yeah, I said Dr. Howard Hall, but we're on the last page, but this is so gorgeous. I'm glad that the board is in here somewhere.
You are definitely in there, either in picture or in input. You are in the plan.
Interesting way to kick us off. We've had lots of conversations about the pictures, the fonts, and the printout of it. And to Dr. Watts' point, I will just add this before I start, is as much as the pictures matter to me, how it looks, and all of those aesthetic things, we are now at the point that what really is going to drive and set our course over the next 5 years is the execution. So I am glad that you're enjoying the pictures, but just know you're not the only one who had feedback on the picture. So we've had lots of conversations around that. But good morning. Good morning, and again, I think Dr. Watts has definitely teed us up. What I will say also before I begin, and Dr. Watts mentioned this, but I just want to double tap it, is the amount of work that the team has done. So I'd like to publicly acknowledge this SIP team, and they are here, so yay. Thank you all for joining. Definitely behind the curtains, pulling all the things together, making sense of all the feedback that we're getting internally and externally. And then I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues that serve on cabinet with me as chiefs. They have done a tremendous amount of work both in leadership, thought partnership, and really pushing themselves and teams. So thank you to the cabinet chiefs for the work that you've done to get us to this point. Yay. And of course, thank you to the superintendent and board for your vision. It has been our team's honor to bring this plan together based on the feedback that we've received. The only thing I'll say that I want to go back to that Dr. Watts mentioned in the tee-up is this whole piece around unlimited possibilities. The name of the plan is really intentional, and it reflects what we believe is possible for our students, staff, and community when we align around a shared vision. So today, what I'll do is briefly walk you through the finalized plan, and in the formal session, we'll bring it forward for approval. What I want to also start with is our outcomes for today. So first, we want to again share the finalized strategic plan framework and reaffirm the core priorities that consistently emerge throughout the process. Second, we want to highlight how the plan moves from vision to implementation through an aligned system of accountability and monitoring. And finally, we want to ensure that there is a clear understanding of how this plan positions us for the future. And at the heart of the plan is, again, the belief in what is possible for our district. And here's a short video that reflects what shaped Unlimited Possibilities.
system is designed to get the results it gets. For Savannah-Chatham, now is our time to design our future-ready school system. Because our students are entering a world that will demand more. More creativity, more adaptability, more opportunity. So before we wrote a plan, we listened. Thousands of voices helped answer one question. What should be possible for every student? What emerged was clear. Excellence cannot depend on the school a student attends. Opportunity cannot depend on circumstance. Every student deserves experiences that prepare them to thrive. That belief became our commitment. Not incremental change, not isolated initiatives. Unlimited possibilities. Unlimited possibilities begins with a shared vision. Every student known, every classroom rigorous, every school future ready. Every graduate prepared to lead, contribute, and create what comes next. This is more than a strategic plan. It is our promise to align our decisions, measure what matters. Unlimited possibilities for every student, every school, every day.
Sorry, I just have to say I love the student narration. That is an awesome touch. Well done.
Thank you again. When you have a great team, they think of all the things. So thank you, Shrada. What I also want to just ground us in or remind us, and you've seen this slide time and time again, is as we engage in the strategic planning process, that it's a shared responsibility and that the board is responsible for governance and helping set direction, and the administration is responsible for operationalizing or bringing to life the plan through the strategies and tactics that are defined. One of the things that I think is important to start this conversation with is the whole notion of thinking about the future. What the future demands is important, and that's one of the realities that we worked within. We acknowledge throughout the process that the world that students are entering continues to change rapidly, and students must be both, or not both, but they should be adaptable, innovative, collaborative, technologically fluent, and prepared to navigate opportunities that may not yet exist. You have heard, and our team has definitely heard Dr. Watts say several times that this plan is about building a fearless district that dares to dream and is unafraid to challenge the status quo. Our plan, and you heard the superintendent talk a little bit about it, but I do want to hit it one more time. Our plan does balance being bold and future thinking, but it also has a very, very strong commitment to foundational excellence. The goal is not boldness for boldness' sake, but it's a recognition of meaningful innovation and transformation and understanding that it has to be built on a strong foundation. So what you'll hear and you'll notice throughout the plan and over the next 5 years is that we will work extremely hard to create baseline experiences and build the foundation that transformation and innovation can sit on. This plan was built by listening first. So we started with listening, and what we heard shaped how we developed the plan or our priorities, and we listened both internally and externally. Throughout the process, we created opportunities to listen and learn from our stakeholders. We also shared the feedback that we heard. We engaged with staff, students, family, community members, business partners, faith leaders, and district leaders. More than 4,500 survey responses, along with community forums, focus groups, interviews, and planning sessions helped shape the direction of our plan. While there were many perspectives, and I do want to underscore there were many perspectives, so we heard a lot, there were things that emerged clearly. One of them being the importance of a strong foundational learning experience, the need for consistency across schools, future-ready opportunities for students, stronger communication and trust, both internally and externally, and systems that operate with greater alignment and accountability. What is reflected in the plan is not the vision of one person, one department, or one group. It is a reflection of collective aspirations and priorities. And so when we listened, what we did is translated what we heard into action. We translated themes into strategic priorities and measurable actions, and built a system for monitoring execution. We'll talk a little bit more about it, and you'll hear about it throughout the life of the plan, but one of the things for me in my seat that I really think a lot about after spending some time in the role is the plan is great, what you say you're going to do is great, but the system in which you monitor and hold yourself and the team accountable is really where the rubber meets the road. And so we've spent a lot of time in this planning process with both the cabinet team, my internal team, and they're probably like eye rolling because we even revisited some things on yesterday. We spent a lot of time thinking about what does monitoring mean and how can we sense make of it in our system so it's something that helps not only us look at performance but also accelerate performance. This helped ensure that the plan is practical and that it meets our both long-term and short-term goals. What we heard then helped us better understand what were the high leverage areas for this plan. And what you'll see on this slide is the key levers that help accelerate or will help accelerate us over the next 5 years. First, we understand, and again, you'll hear it time and time again, that we have to strengthen student experience. Second, we are clear that we have to build greater system capacity. And then third, preparing the district for the future will cause for us to have to be innovative and do things differently. As these priorities became clearer and based on your feedback, and when I say your, I specifically mean the board, I heard loud and clear at one of the board retreats, we were baseline experience, and you all said to us what? You remember? What is the baseline experience? Ms. Hall specifically said, can you define the baseline experience? And so we've done that. And what you'll see on this slide is it captures the baseline experience for every student in our district. Regardless of the school, we want every student to experience rigorous instruction, strong literacy and numeracy foundations, engaging and relevant learning, a sense of belonging, and meaningful pathways connected to life after graduation. Our commitment is to ensure excellence for every student, every day, and every school. To make that experience possible, again, we are clear that we must operate differently. To bring this plan to life, and we heard the superintendent say earlier that this is not just a plan that is going to sit on a shelf. Even as late as yesterday, I was like, it doesn't look right. We shouldn't. She's like, no, ma'am. This plan is moving. I was like, we should wait. The printed copy don't. Nope. This plan will be live, and really, what we're going to do to bring the plan to life is leverage culture, leadership, and innovation. Culture will create the conditions for transformation by fostering trust, collaboration, shared ownership, and continuous improvement across the district. Leadership is required and will be leveraged for more than just technical skills. We talked a little bit about this at one of our budget meetings. Leadership is, in this plan, looks more than just understanding technical things or understanding how to do a role. It is going to require, over the next 5 years, leaders who can build capacity, develop people, navigate change, solve problems, and keep their teams aligned to the shared vision. The other thing is innovation, and it's going to be required for us to remain future-focused, adaptable, and willing to continuously learn, improve, and really rethink how we serve students, how we leverage staff, and also how we serve families. So together, these elements will help move the plan from vision to action. The plan connects strategy, budgeting, and return on investment. Part of this work, as we built the strategic plan, the district was continuously strengthening its focus on ROI and strategic resource allocation to align investments to district priorities and student outcomes. The plan creates greater clarity, stronger stewardship, and more intentional investment decision-making across the organization. Our strategic plan not only took into account budget, but we also had a big aha around the realization that we needed to set clear values that would shape and define how we lead, make decisions, work together, serve students, staff, and families. And so we are excited that this plan does name for us values. And again, our values are not intended to be mantras for t-shirts, banners in hallways, but these are values that we want to really reverse engineer. Our values are intended to shape our behavior, leadership decision-making, and organizational culture. The center of the values are our commitment to excellence, integrity, alignment, accountability, and putting students first. Everything I have highlighted is designed around one central outcome, and that's to ensure that our students are future ready. So this is a rendition of what you may remember in one of your board meetings, but this is kind of when we put all the pieces of the plan together. And what you'll see on this slide is this is how we actually activate or achieve unlimited possibilities. And it's unique in the fact that you start from the bottom and work your way up. And at the foundation of the plan is our baseline experience. And sitting on top of the baseline experience are the enabling conditions, which we in our plan name as our pillars: academic excellence, world-class talent, engagement and partnership, operational excellence, and accountability. And braided throughout the entire plan are culture, innovation, and leadership, and that's why I wanted to highlight those things as a standalone, because they will be very important throughout the plan because they are woven or braided throughout every element of the plan. This slide reflects how we intend to move from a strategic plan and being aspirational to disciplined execution or implementation, and we talked a little bit about that earlier. We recognize that this plan is ambitious. Like, we're really clear, and as we look at some of the strategies and tactics we've named, we are really asking ourselves, how do we organize it in a way that we get it done? And we recognize that everything cannot be done at one time, but we know we have to get it all done over time. And so this plan, and what you'll see at the bottom is the implementation phases, is what this does is highlight the approach that we'll take around implementation. So some things we'll be planning in certain years, launching, and then other things will have full implementation and will eventually sustain. So what this does is allow the district to build capacity, learn through implementation, and scale our work strategically. So instead of trying to do a lot of things, we want to do a few things well, and then we want to be able to scale, replicate, and expand over the 5 years. Something else, and we talked about it at BAC, but I want to bring it back up, is we have rethought about how we actually measure the success of the plan. You are most familiar with KPIs. This plan will shift to a tiered goal model, and what the slide does is outline the 3 tiers of goals. So the first tier, which is tier 1 goals, they focus on long-term goals and outcomes that define student success, and so we will have 6 tier 1 goals, and tier 2 goals are progress indicators that help monitor our progress towards our tier 1 goals. Those are most commonly known as leading indicators, so that's the checkup. And then we have tier 3 goals. Those are internal performance measures that support operational execution. So those are goals that chiefs make for their particular teams and departments based on what they know they need to accomplish to help achieve the tier 1 goal over time. So when you look at the tier 1 goals, again, there's 6 goals, and they're outlined here. These goals represent our commitment to high levels of student outcomes, and again, we want to accomplish this over the next 5 years. Our tier 1 goals establish the direction and create clarity around what matters most for our students. So you'll notice that all of our tier 1 goals are related directly to student outcomes. Importantly, the goals reflect, again, that our commitment over the next 5 years is to improve student outcomes. Beneath the tier 1 goals are the tier 2 goals, and these are progress indicators that will be visible and we will be looking at over time to ensure that we reach our tier 1 goals. These progress indicators allow the district to identify trends, make adjustments, and monitor implementation before outcomes are final. One of the things that we know is important is that we can't wait for GMAS or whatever the summative assessment is. We have to be really strategic and have a strong way in which we consistently monitor what's happening along the way, so there are no surprises. And we recognize that through implementation, we will have to make adjustments, and as we look at our tier 2 goals, that will help as we look to adjust. All right. Now, talked a little bit about goals. I mentioned earlier monitoring, but I want to really highlight, and you'll see on this slide, the district's approach to continuous improvement and accountability. Rather than viewing implementation as a one-time rollout, so today is an important day, but not as important as what will happen every day over the next 5 years. So we want to set ourselves up to be able to operate through an ongoing cycle of planning, implementing, monitoring, adjusting, supporting, and reporting back. And what this will allow us to do is establish a cadence of both accountability in board meetings, cabinet meetings, extended cabinet meetings, team meetings, school visits, district leader meetings, but we want to set ourselves up for ongoing review of progress. And what this is allows us to monitor, not for compliance, but monitor in a way so that we can adjust to get the results that we're seeking to get over time. And then the feedback and reflection also positions us to make improvements and learn from, again, as I've mentioned before, what's working and what may need to be adjusted. Finally, you may remember this slide too. We talked a little bit about this. We have implementation phases for our specific tactics, but we do also have phases for our strategic plan, and that is here before you. And what this will allow us to do is really work on building the foundation through aligned leadership communication, trust, and early action, and that's what we'll be focusing on for year 1, and we'll go throughout the plan until we shift what is normal for our district. I will pause here. I feel like I've been saying a lot, so I'm going to pause here to see if you have questions or feedback at this point.
We're just waiting on you.
Go ahead, break the seal, Ms. Hall.
Dr. Taylor, could we go back to world-class talent?
Say it again, world-class talent?
Sure. It's important that we understand that all of this is talking about people.
Yes.
You know, people, that's the
our
only
business.
resource we have to get this done. And if we're saying that one of our main experiences is that they're going to be exposed to world-class talent,
Ms. Hall.
oh, I'm sorry, that they're going to be exposed to world-class talent, then we have to be prepared to bring on that world-class talent and retain it anytime it presents itself to us. So we can't wait for someone to retire so that we can hire this person because we don't have the money to pay this world-class talent. So I'm tying this into the budget, that all of the budget, everything we're doing depends on the people we have to work for us. And all of this, none of this is going to happen if we don't have those people engaged and ready to implement this. And to me, that's always where we've fallen short.
Yes.
We have the grandiose ideas, the beautiful plans, but the implementation falls short because the people aren't in place who take this seriously enough to mind their own business, stay in their lane, do what they do best, you know, create that excellence around themselves. Don't worry about what Mr. Grabowski's doing or Mr. Cashmar doing. Maintain your own sense of excellence. And to me, that's going to take concentration and monitoring of that. And that's what I'll be looking forward to seeing over the next couple of years, how we actually find our talent and reward our talent.
You don't see it. Ditto. Echo, ditto, cosign, all the things. The plan is only as good as the talent that we have to bring it to life or to implement it. What I will say, and I'm sure Dr. Watts would like to weigh in also, but you don't see it here because we're not showing strategies and tactics, but if you dig down into the strategy and tactic level in that full document, you will see some of the very things that you named: succession planning, leadership development, pay for performance, calibrating around what is excellence, because that's just like you pushed us on what is the baseline experience. We also have to establish for ourselves and our teams what does excellence look and sound like, and so you'll see some of that when you look at the tactics and strategies, but I would absolutely agree. Dr. Watts?
No addition.
Okay.
Ms. Campbell?
I love this. I think I know the time that went into it, and Mr. Robinson doing all the interviews, and he is wonderful and did a great job with all that too. God bless him. So one thing I wanted to ask about was when we talk about standard baseline levels, I know one thing that gets brought up a lot, and what I hear about a lot, and I think some of my fellow board members, is like conduct, like behavior. Where is that in the plan?
Dr. Barnes is going to walk us through that a bit. He'll talk a little bit about that. Dr. Barnes?
Yeah, so good morning. Student conduct and student culture is the foundation for the work that we have to do. So to call it explicit in the plan, we have to think about it as it's the undergirding student experience that we're shaping as a result of this plan. When we look at Pillar 1 that comes up in this plan, in order to maximize that on a high level, that we know that we have to address student culture. And as we get more specific, so we can lead this plan with addressing student culture, or we can lead it from a standpoint of what is the culture that we want to have in all schools, which encompasses the adult culture, the student culture, and then the instructional culture. And as we drive the instructional culture, by default, we start focusing on giving students the right experiences, highly engaging them, where we can deter some of those unwanted behaviors. It is one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle that comes is when we look at the pillar around our talent management strategy. As we continue to build the capacity of our leaders and our teachers to engage students in high quality, high engaging instructional practices, some of those behaviors are deterred. And then the next thing is, as we think about the wraparound services that supports the social development and the development readiness of students, this is where we start deterring those behaviors as well. I will be very cautious to say we lead with a student code of conduct or a student, behavior, but we lead from a lens of an encompassing culture for what students will experience as a result of adult behaviors changing from an instructional lens, also changing from how we engage and approach the student experiences for what we want in all schools.
And if I can just add, what you're not seeing, which is actually my favorite part of the plan, are the tactics.
Yes.
So you will see a lot of what he just articulated at the tactical level, not at the level that you're seeing. And we will be happy, I will be more than happy to get the tactics to you, because it provides the color, the leader actions, the explicit things that we will be doing next year and over the course of 5 years that addresses behavior, that addresses instruction. But you just don't see it in this, because that really is kind of the internal playbook, the tactical piece. But to me, it is what brings this to life.
And that was, Dr. Barnes said exactly what I was hoping that we were all on the same
5
page
years,
with, which
but
is
many things.
if the culture is dissolved or we're not setting an expectation for behavior, like none of the other things matter, right? So all the things we're aiming for, and it sounds like you guys are all over that, which doesn't surprise me. I would love to see that from Dr. Watts. And then do we have what the metrics are, like third grade reading on grade level? Like what are we shooting for?
We do. I can share those with you. We shared them at the BAC meeting, and they're also in the Word document that you have, but these are the 6 things I don't want to quote them without having them because I haven't had a lot of sleep, but I'll get them very quickly. Dr. May will grab them for me and we'll get them, but we do have them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
These are our tier 1 goals. There
Right.
are tier 2 indicators, and then there are tier 3. So there's 3 levels. But these are the ones that we want to be held accountable for. They are the most public-facing. Tier 2 goals are also public-facing, but these are the public-facing goals that focus on student outcomes that will drive our accountability.
Awesome. Nice work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Grabowski?
I will echo, it's beautifully done, and a lot of time has clearly gone into the content, the delivery, the presentation, all of which are excellent. So thank you for all the hard work. And looking at this slide as well as the other one you had up with the Future Ready, one of the things that really I love is, that one, the belonging and joy. Because I think that is, like, if students feel that they are part of something and if they they want to be there, like, everything else will
Yes.
work itself out. Like the behavior issues and
yeah.
and so forth. So, and I think that is something that we kind of talk about in the periphery, but to see it really embedded in the plan, I think it's a bold choice and one that that I'm very excited to see in the plan, because I think we've seen students who, you know, especially like our littles, like they're happy to be at school and then they get in middle school and something changes and like, ugh, this isn't fun anymore, right? So I look forward to seeing how that plays itself out. And then a question I had, and this probably is along the lines of what Ms. Campbell was asking, can you talk about what we can kind of expect to see on the progress metrics evaluation side? We spent a lot of time talking about KPIs, but you mentioned those other layers, so would love to understand kind of
Yes.
what we should expect on that front.
We will actually go through them for you real quickly.
Oh, awesome, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
So if I can, so when we look at our 6 core goals, each of the goals, and we can go through them one by one if you would like, will have progress indicators associated with them that we will provide data on either every middle of year, end of year, beginning of year, middle of year, end of year cycle, or quarterly, depending on the nature of the progress indicators. So the first goal is foundational literacy skills. That concentrates on early reading and writing. So we will have data from NWEA MAP. We will also have data from common formative assessments that will be implemented starting school year 26-27, and that data will be provided on the appropriate cadence.
Can you name the specific goal for them? Or goal 1, what is the specific goal?
The progress indicators, I do. So for those, I apologize, my computer was, of course, resetting with updates. So with regard to goal 1, the outcome ultimately is that by 2031, 90% of students in grades K2 will demonstrate strong foundational literacy skills, such as phonemic awareness, phonics fluency, as measured by AMIRA. So we'll have that AMIRA data. The way that we will specifically progress monitor, so those measures that you're looking for, is that we will be able to provide a monthly percentage of students in grades K through 2 who are on track for reading on grade level. We also will be able to provide those metrics that you're used to with regard to growth rates. So we will compare that beginning of year to middle of year. So what does that growth look like, as well as that middle of year point to the end of year. And this is going to be really critical data, and we'll be able to see from a projective standpoint how we might be tracking toward performance later on in later grade levels. Obviously, the first one is on early literacy. So as we progress to the second goal, So goal 2 is where we're looking specifically at third grade reading on grade level. And of course, third grade is when we start looking toward GMAS outcomes as well. So for this one, by 2031, 95% of third grade students will meet the Georgia milestones reading on grade level benchmark. That is our ultimate goal. So with regard to progress monitoring, we're looking once again at monthly AMIRA indicators. AMIRA is utilized in grades K through 3, so we will have that data for them as well. And very similar to what we're doing with the early literacy, we will be providing that growth data as we look from their beginning of year to middle of year progress, middle of year to end of year progress. And we'll be able to project toward what that reading on grade level on GMAS, our summative assessment, may look like too, based on triangulating that data. With regard to goal 3 focuses on English language arts and math achievement. So our goal ultimately, per our strategic plan, is that district-wide ELA and math achievement will reach a content mastery score, which is weighted of 70 or above. So we have set a very lofty goal in this regard as well. With regard to progress monitoring there, we're going to look at our NWEA MAP assessments, and at beginning, middle, and end of year, there are projections toward what that content mastery will look like that will be able to be provided. We also will monitor growth, and here specifically we're looking at the percentage of students who are exceeding expected growth as we're looking at that middle of year and end of year data points. As we look at goal 4, so goal 4 is centered on student attendance. Here, by 2031, we would like 90% of our students in grades K through 12 to be absent less than 10% of enrolled school days, which of course is the state metric for student attendance. With regard to progress monitoring, we will be able to provide monthly attendance monitoring updates via our student information system. We also will be able to get a view of trend data with regard to chronic absenteeism by school, grade level, and student group. If at any point you have any questions, please just let me know.
And I'll also, we'll share with you.
They're on pages 13
Yes.
and
Oh, that's a
14.
good point. If they are,
Yes.
that's why I like it.
Yes.
But we'll also send them to you as well, but they're in the book.
Well, let me ask one question.
Sure.
So how do you envision like presenting this data? Will we have a dashboard? Will there be some way to kind of continually?
We hope, if we have a dashboard, we hope to be
Yes, that is our
able to make these public facing, the tier 1 and the tier 2, so the
Yes.
outcome and the progress, the measure of progress, we hope to have a dashboard that allows you all to see those in real time on the cadence that Dr. May just spoke of. But we, of course, have school board meetings, superintendent notes that I send, and we will kind of, over the next couple of months, provide for you a roadmap of when each of these things would be presented, whether it's a superintendent note, a BAC update, or a school board update. So it'll, in a way, it follows similarly to what we've done in the past of how those things are presented. Everything is not always in a school board meeting. Some things are presented in BAC, and some things are simply presented in a superintendent's note that I email out to you all.
And all of those are great, but it's also really challenging. Okay, I know I saw that somewhere. Was it a board meeting?
Exactly.
Was it, like, being able to track all of that is
Impossible.
impossible.
We are
So-
working extremely hard to stand up a dashboard, so I'm actually glad this
Okay.
conversation has come up.
Because we need the budget to pass. so
We need the
can go in
budget
that.
ask to be able to do it, and one of the things, I don't remember where it is in implementation, but we have worked and are beginning to scope out a board dashboard, so you would have a specific view just for you as board members, so even within the dashboard that you don't have to dig and sense makeup. I've been hearing from certain folks in the organization, depending on your seat, you need to see something different germane to the work that you do in the organization. And so that is one of the ways in which the dashboard will be organized. So please remember that as we move forward into future conversations.
Okay. Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, thank you. Great. Is this on?
Yeah.
Thank you, and excellent job on putting all of this together. And back to the culture, I'm always concerned about that. And it's highlighted in the plan, culture of belonging, trust, and high expectations, which is most important. So I just want to know what it looks like. What does a uniform standard for addressing student conduct look like, which upholds integrity across the district as it pertains to our policies and the code of conduct? Because it really does look differently in each school, and it's important because it'll be difficult to
To do this.
perceive unlimited possibilities and chaos.
Absolutely.
And we know that we're still working on the culture of many of our schools. And I know you've done a great job with beginning the process. So can you just kind of tell us what is the uniform standard for student conduct?
Uniform in there somewhere? Or
No.
are you using that word?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
We keep talking about consistency,
It
so
it is
it aligns
consistency.
with uniform.
And as it relates to consistency, we want every classroom to be structured, orderly, and conducive to learning. We want hallway transitions to be smooth and orderly. We want few distractions, no distractions in a typical school day. I don't know that I want to go down to the level of describing, how a student sits on the carpet or in his or her desk on a day-to-day basis. But those are kind of the standards that we would be looking for as we are walking through a school or walking in a classroom. Is the environment such that a student has an environment that is free of distractions? The day is free of distractions so that teaching and learning can occur in a predictable, consistent manner. So I don't know if that is a specific answer to your question, but and maybe we do need to get a little bit more specific, but that's essentially what we're looking for.
Okay.
And
Miss,
now-
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. And also, it's come up just recently, what happens if anticipated funding is reduced? Is there anything that we can afford not to do that's outlined in this strategic plan, knowing that it takes a budget in order for it to happen? So what will happen if anticipated funding is reduced?
I mean, it would challenge some places. We have additional staffing at schools like Groves because of the way that building is designed. It makes it very difficult to monitor hallway transitions and movement. So I'm just using that as an isolated example. So baked into the budget is additional staff for hall monitors. We know we implemented that this year and saw great success. And so when we talk about reducing funding, in many ways, you're talking about not being able to do some of the things that you just described. That's paid for out of local dollars. That's not a state. Hall monitors and support in the hallways are not a part of our QBE funding. That is what we have chosen to do. And we need to do that in other places as well. Another example would be places like Savannah Arts Academy. Their allocation of staff does not really meet the needs for a specialized school. So we have above allotment positions that come out of the local budget that go so that those kids can have the experiences that kids in a traditional high school have, as well as the specialized courses that they need. And so those are all the things that, again, when we talk about local funding being reduced, that in some cases we would have to do without if we don't find choices and trade-offs.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Campbell and then Ms. Hall.
Dr. Howard Hall just reminded me of something else with the culture and the behavior conduct piece. On page 14 in here that now I know exists with all the numbers on it that we're asking for, it says that 90% of students, so under goal 5, will demonstrate positive belonging and engagement measured by, and then student survey responses and the inverse of weighted suspension weight. What, can you explain number 2 to me, what we're looking at there?
So when we're reporting student behavior per Godot metrics, what we provide you is the weighted suspension rate. So that would be that would indicate suspensions. The opposite of that is all the students who
Are thriving and happy?
are
and
doing
okay.
very well, engaging in the behaviors that we are cultivating and aspire to have all of our students live up to.
Makes sense. One gentle push that I would give, and I think I said this at maybe one of the retreats, is I do worry as I hear more from teachers and families about the CCRPI and how there's nothing we can do about what they weighed in there from the state. But I know that behavior definitely contributes to the overall score. And so whether correct or incorrect, some people believe that it disincentivizes admin or teachers from, actually disciplining students because it'll hurt CCRPI. Or in this case, I would hate for them to be trying to achieve a 90% and say, well, we don't have any referrals.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
We've been having that conversation internally. I do think the data that we currently are seeing in our internal dashboard is more reflective of the accurate,
Yes.
which means we didn't make our KPI for discipline because it is an accurate reflection. And so that has been a culture shift that we have had to make, that we're not going to hide data. We're going to report what actually happens. And if that means there is an increase, then that's what that means. But over time, if we are consistent in our application of discipline, you should see a reduction.
Totally agree with you, and I want them to know that I celebrate if we didn't meet that KPI and
We
it's because
did
they were
not.
following through, then
We did not.
good job. Because that means as we are more consistent, that hopefully these things change and we will have more kids that feel happy and safe at school, so.
And the only thing I'll add, and I know this wasn't directly related to your question, but I do think it's important to note, the way that we are measuring it relates to the culture that we're trying to promote. That's why we do it in the reverse.
Ms. Hall?
Dr. May,
Yes, ma'am.
I wish that our goal was reading, writing, and speaking. I wish speaking was in there. I've mentioned that before. I intentionally talk to our students that I know from kindergarten to 12th grade to see how they respond to me. So it's really important that we teach our foundational levels how to speak. Okay. Just want
Absolutely
to mention
acknowledge and
that.
absolutely agree with you.
Okay.
I think public speaking is one of those critical skills that we definitely want our graduates to be able to develop during their time with us and then be able to apply once they graduate and move on to their
Yeah, I don't know that everybody is going to be a public speaker, but just a conversational speaker. That you get more than a one-word answer. Yes, no, uh-huh. So that's what when I say speaking, you don't have to be a Barack Obama. I'm just talking about knowing how to converse.
Understood. And that will also show up in part of our literacy work. So as we're building the reading, writing skills, part of that is also speaking, to your point, not germane to only public speaking, but understanding how language connects with reading and writing, because it's all interconnected.
And Dr. Taylor, I hope we understand that that means practice. You're not going to learn how to speak if you don't get a chance to
Agreed.
practice it. So if the teacher's just doing all the talking and the children aren't, they're not going to learn that. So
Agreed. And I'm laughing because I don't know if you remember this in the video, but though it didn't make a KPI, it did make the video. We had a young lady at a mic, and every time I watched the video and we edited, I thought of you. I was like, Ms. Hall's going to really like a student in class speaking.
it was good, and I'll watch that. On a more serious note, Dr. Howard Hall was asking about consistency, and we have to talk about what the public thinks. So if I have an honor roll student at Garrison who uses profanity against a teacher, is that outcome going to be the same as one of my chronically disruptive students at Gadsden, if it's the same conduct? Or Savannah High versus early college? Are the outcomes the same for the activity, or is it who your parents are, or Ms. Hall's nephew goes to Savannah High, so he gets different from, you know?
So generally speaking, the goal, to answer your question, is that there are consistent outcomes, but every situation is different. A student may have a special need, a disability that might perpetuate certain behavior that we would all say, wow, that's discipline. You know, we need to discipline, but it's actually a part of that student's disability. And so we have to look at those circumstances. You have to look at the circumstances that caused the behavior. Again, many of us would love to believe that all circumstances, every day is a structured, orderly day, and adults never do anything, right, that would cause something to go awry. But at times, as adults, we create situations with kids, maybe not use of profanity, right, but other situations that may cause a disruption. And so you just have to take into consideration all the nuances of a situation. I know Ms. Grabowski and I had a conversation earlier this week that teeters right on the line that you're talking about right now, that one little element of a situation totally reshapes the way you look at it. So the answer basically is yes, in general, we want to do calibration activities with our principals next year to help them be able to look at discipline and be more consistent. But at the same time, we're dealing with children, and every child is different. I've raised 2 sons myself, and there might be something that I discipline one for that I would not necessarily discipline another one for, because the circumstances or the situation that created it were different. So because we deal with children, I cannot say that 100% of the time, every disciplinary consequence we give to a kid will always be the same. I won't commit to that, but I'll commit to the effort to be as consistent as possible.
Well, I think that's a very fair answer. Zero tolerance never worked. So absolutely, judgment is what's important. But over time, if you consistently see that
Yes.
things are not balancing out, then that to me is a warning to us that we are still in our minds differentiating things, behaviors on values that are not the judgment ones that you're talking about.
Exactly.
So,
Ms. Grabowski?
You know, I think this is an interesting conversation that, we have 55 sites or something, and we have a huge portfolio of schools that do have differences, and I think we celebrate those differences because that's what allows our students and our families to find the place that works best for them. And I absolutely believe in the consistency. And I think when Dr. Watts heard the word uniform, it kind of made her ears prick, and it did me too, because I don't think it is the uniformity, it's the
It's a difference.
consistency.
Right.
And I hope that with the goal of our talent, that some of these concerns that we've seen and inconsistencies will be addressed, but that will also require us to have trust in our staff. And one of the things that we have heard from our, professional senate, I know Ms. Goldman is here when she served on the state teacher retention board, sorry, I don't remember what the formal name of it was, or teacher burnout, yes. One of the things we heard is teachers not being treated as professionals. So if we want to have, we need to treat our staff and our teachers as professionals. And if they're not living up to those expectations of
right.
performing as a professional, that's absolutely. But I don't know, just a thought that came to me as we're having this conversation, that we do have to have trust in them to be able to use their judgment in a way that recognizes their unique relationship with their students that nobody else is going to have as well. Because I did have someone share with me, some additional information around a discipline issue that happened, and it was very unusual for this particular child to act in the way they did, but it was because of and because that teacher knew that student, said, hey, this is not usual behavior, allowed that teacher to be able to dig deeper into what was truly happening. And so we have to give our teachers that grace and that space to be able to investigate and truly understand what's happening.
Mr. Smith and then Dr. Howard Hall.
Thank you for your presentation. This has been a beautiful presentation to look at and listen to. So thank you for your time and your energy. I would like to echo the sentiments of many of my board members, but I want to piggyback off of Ms. Denise for just a moment. She talked about basically trusting our employees and our staff. With that question or statement, how many principals have been involved in this process?
So that's a great question. Every principal, and multiple times, they've had multiple passes, and we've also pulled in leaders similar to how you engaged in an interview. Some leaders were interviewed. They also participated in focus groups. We've done whole group work. Teams have done work outside of work that we've coordinated with their individual chiefs, so the principals are aware. And many of the things that you see are based on their feedback. And by the time that iteration got to you, we already heard their feedback. One of the things that I remember most vividly is this push from principals to name students, say student more, to make the student more visible in the plan. And hopefully you see that. The other thing that I'll add that relates to your question in the previous conversation is the conversation that has just been had is really how the synergy that the plan has, that there is not a department thing, it's not a school thing. For academic excellence to happen, we have to get talent right. For talent to be doing the things that we need them to do and working effectively, we have to engage them. And that's part of our internal strategy around engagement. And then operational, we have to hold folks accountable if they aren't operating in the way that we say that we, espouse for our district. So I want to just point that out as I listen to the conversation. It really reminded me of how the plan is not compartmentalized, that it all goes together, and that the pillars they're going to be the conditions that we have to have in place for all of the reasons that you've named in order for us to achieve this.
Awesome. I love the idea of consistency, but I also understand that every student is not at the same place. So
Yep.
I think that it's important that we remember that we have to meet the students where they are, but not leave them where they are. So
Agreed.
I'm grateful
I like
that
that.
we're adopting this mindset. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you for your leadership.
Dr. Howard Hall.
I'm going to take it on another look. We're talking about individual students, but as I referenced before, if something happens once in a school, it's part of the school climate. But if it happens more than once, it becomes part of the school culture. And there are some schools whereas profanity among the students are used more often in halls, in the cafeteria, in different places. It's used frequently and almost common for students, not one, just students as a whole, to be disrespectful in the midst of adults using profanity, whereas another school is not allowed at all. So as Dr. Barnes keeps, he continues to tell us that it's about the leadership, the overall leadership of the school, which can control that culture. Because if you walk in a school and you don't hear a child using profanity and then one child does, that child probably will be disciplined because that's not part of that culture.
Yes, ma'am.
Whereas another school it is. So that's why it's so important when I use words like consistency and uniformity. It's because the leadership definitely needs to be consistent and have the same high expectations.
Think about the through lines. Leadership. We have to develop the leaders to be able to create the culture. And again, culture is a through line. So again, I'm kind of geeking out because I'm like, okay, this is how it's designed to behave. And to your point, we have to develop leaders so that they can create the culture that we're naming for ourselves and our district over the next 5 years. Great conversation.
Anyone else? This has been amazing. I thank you guys so much. My only comments, I want to go back to the six, I think it's back one.
The other way?
No, go forward. The goals.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, hold on one second. Here.
So, yes, and by the way, I will always agree with Mrs. Hall on on the importance of speech. That is why I'm going to say one more time, I want us to not only consider, but I want us to work with our partners and instituting debate in our high schools. And actually, if we can get it in our middle schools, I would love it, because our children need to learn how to have conversations.
Yes, agreed.
Okay? But what I love about these goals is on the ELA, you are starting, and I love that we start with this, we start with one, which is early reading and writing. I know that on ELA, that has been our students' challenge, has been writing. So if we're starting with early reading and writing and being consistent about that, we can get to goal 3. So thank you for that. I love the belonging and joy. And back to our school principals, you know, our school principals, they set the culture. And some principals are really good at that. But setting that culture is communicating to all the parents, communicating to all the students that this will be a school of belonging and joy. Yes, and yes. Well, the thing is, if you have structure and order, you're going to have belonging and joy. But our parents, this is, you know, this has got to be stressed to all of our parents, so they know up front, okay, this is where we're going for all of our students. All of our students will be in a safe environment. And we are going to protect all of our students. And if your child is part of not protecting that, there are consequences. So parents, please don't be surprised. And work with us. But this is absolutely amazing. And thank you to the staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we've made a note about speech, so thank you for that push. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We're gonna have time for
Presentation next.
yes. Okay. And now the really fun part, our budget presentation.
Yes. So as I bring our partners, Alvarez and Marsal, up to the podium, I want to take an opportunity to begin by acknowledging that we are at June, which is our tentative and our final adoption of the budget, pending some other circumstances that we'll get into in just a moment. But what I would like to say is this has truly been a journey. The budget cycle, contrary to what some folks may believe, has not been business as usual. From the beginning, the board has asked administration to bring forward a budget that more honestly reflects what is needed to operate this district responsibly, transparently, and with greater discipline. And that really required my team and I to look and examine mandatory costs, baseline operating needs, and what our strategic investments would be, and to also make some reductions. And we have done that through a very rigorous lens. I want to be clear with you that when I speak about fiscal stewardship, I'm not talking about a future state, a future promise that I am making. It is work that is happening right now, every day, and it has been happening. Again, maybe the story is not coming through as compelling as I would like it to be, but there is clear data that shows we have taken meaningful steps to be good stewards to the taxpayers, as well as deal with the needs of our students and our school districts so we can be successful. We have reduced the millage rate. We don't contribute now as much to the fund balance as we used to make, to that contribution. That means we are spending the money more fiscally responsibly, and we're spending the money that we ask for every year. When you think about ROI, we have made millions of dollars, about $19 million worth of reductions and adjustments or sunsets. And we've also reallocated funds where we see a return on investment. To me, that is clear evidence, and I could name 5 or 6 other things that I won't name right now, that we are making attempts to deal with our budget and be good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars. These are not symbolic adjustments. They are real shifts in how we are approaching public dollars with greater scrutiny, clear trade-offs, and stronger evidence. I want to commend the team. They've made some real difficult choices and trade-offs. It's been a complex process for many of our chiefs to get their brains wrapped around, because this is the first year they've had a line of sight into their budgets and know how they work. And that has been a learning curve, and they've done that with a lot of effort and time. The budget in and of itself may not reflect the reductions that I just spoke about. That is because the same gas that you pay for that is now much more expensive, when you go to the gas, when you go put gas in your car, we're putting that same gas in our buses. So as prices rise for our taxpayers, prices are also rising for the school district. And on top of that, we have mandatory costs that the state imposes upon us that we don't have a choice to pay for. And so, yes, when you look at our budget over time, you do see increases of the budget year over year. That is because the same impact of the economic world around us is happening to us, and on top of that, we have mandatory costs. I don't want the board, myself, and my team to view our budgeting process as a year-by-year exercise. I'm actually, and have been, working on a 5-year financial strategy that has been taking place and will continue to take place, where we will be benchmarking our departments to look at places where we're overstaffed. We'll be doing more around facilities utilization, compensation review, how we're using overtime, how we're using grants and contracts. All of that could not happen in 1 year. I can't boil the ocean, right? So we do also have inefficiencies in our system, and I do believe there are places where we can become leaner, smarter, and more disciplined. But again, we cannot boil the ocean in one budget cycle. If we try to solve every issue at once, we risk creating unintended consequences that may be more costly than the problems that we're actually trying to fix. So today, as we approach the tentative budget, I want to stress that it's the next step in a very disciplined process that has been used, a strategy that may not be visible but has definitely been happening. I will always put the needs of our students first. I do not like and will not engage in a debate around what I do for taxpayers versus what I do for kids. That's a debate you will not draw me into, because our kids are the most important thing to me. And yes, taxpayers are important, but kids come first. So this is the work that we will do. We will have a spirit of stewardship, shared accountability, and operational excellence, because that's the work required to build a school system that's responsible, both academically and financially. So with that said, I will turn our presentation over to our partners, Alvarez and Marsal.
Thank you, Dr. Watson, and thanks to the board for having us here today. Quick reminder, I'm Mike Potter. I'm a managing director with Alvarez and Marsal Public Sector Services. You guys have been used to seeing my colleague, Sheena Gordon, here. Sheena is moving towards maternity leave rapidly and won't be on site anymore. So I'm going to do my best to fill in. Obviously have big shoes to fill, but hope we can provide some helpful information here. Just to cover, talk through what we're hoping to cover during this conversation. First, we're going to go through a quick introduction. We're going to talk about the preliminary budget request overview, and primarily focusing on changes from the things that you saw last time we spoke. Talk about the future of revenue in the district, and how the changes in the policy environment will change the way that the board's revenue changes in the future, and then spend a little bit of time on fund balance, and then sort of wrap up by talking about the budget process and the work that's in the future ahead of us and next steps. Just to sort of anchor the conversation where we're at in the process, this visual represents the scope and sequence that we've used to develop the budget with board input. Back in March, we aligned on budget guardrails where we talked about what was important to you and also what the roles of the board and the administration are in developing the budget. We then previewed the budget baseline approach, gave details into the things that you had asked for in terms of visibility in what's required or mandated by QBE, what are the things that we do that are decisions that we make every year on a baseline, and then started to preview the strategic additions to the budget, the things that are part of the district strategy, and then started putting it all together last month with a preliminary view of what we thought the budget may look like. And now here we are in June, we're doing final refinements, a vote on the budget and millage rate. It's very important to note that today we're going to talk about the tentative budget, but as we stand here, unless anybody can update me from behind my shoulder, the county has not provided us an updated tax digest. And so, as you all are familiar with, likely from past years, the tax digest and the property tax revenue constitutes about 2/3 of the district's revenue, and the district's revenue, and thus the budget, is very sensitive to that. So what we present here is based on some assumptions that we think are reasonable, but that could need to be updated or reassessed during the course of the remainder of the month, pending the completion of the tax digest. I'll note that revenue finalization is delayed compared to what is usual. I understand last year at this meeting it came in the day of the meeting, and as we stand here, it has not come in. We've been in communication with the County Board of Assessors, and they've shared that some of the changes in state tax policy that many of you are familiar with have delayed, for example, the homestead exemption changes have delayed the creation of the tax digest. And so while we think we've planned for these things in our sort of estimate, the information is only as good as the data that underlies it. So we want to be really realistic about the fact that we've proposed a budget that balances today, but that we could end up with more revenue or less revenue that would require us to make adjustments as the month goes on.
I'm sorry.
Before you start, I'd like to ask a question of Dr. Watts. If the same state that requires that we have a balanced budget on June 30th
July 1st.
is responsible for us not getting the tax digest in a timely fashion so that we can intelligently vote on the budget, what is the penalty for that to the state or to the county?
I'm not sure. That would probably be something that would require legal input.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to put Attorney Dennison or Lee on the spot, but I just want us to keep that mindset that we're trying diligently to follow what our mandates are. But if the very people who demand our mandates be followed are the ones who are obstructing that, then the public needs to know that. It shouldn't be just something that we know. The public needs to know that obstruction is there. And like I said about world-class talent, we're talking about people. We're not talking about some ultra alien force. We're talking about people who are making these decisions and carrying through these processes, and they come down and trickle to us. So just keep that mindset so that we're not feeling guilty because we're not ready to produce a balanced budget on the 30th because we don't know how much money we have. How silly that is if you really think about it. And I don't mean to color your presentation, but I just wanted to make sure that mindset is in place.
Yeah, I appreciate the input, and thanks for the comments. I think one thing to note is that the district does have options to continue funding the district's operations without that answer, complete. The challenge is, of course, making like good strategic decisions when you get the answer so late. And so the district is prepared to, part of the value of a more detailed budget process is that should we end up with an unfavorable surprise, we have a lot stronger baseline of what priorities are, what we can adjust to, what options might be. But it's very challenging to do that as well, and particularly with the level of input that you'd like to have, should that happen on June 25th or, heaven forbid, July 1st, right? So we just want to communicate that as sort of underlying this is that we'd love to be able to say, yes, this is the final budget, but when we don't know what 2/3 of the revenue are, we want to talk about what we built up in terms of expenditures, what we think that looks like, what we hope that looks like, and then, provide that view with the hope that by June 24th, we have a very clear view, because we can't obviously set a millage rate if we don't know what the tax base is. So, thank you. So we'll go ahead and continue on. Just as a reminder from our work in March and April, the way that the board and the district have defined the budget roles are really to align with being in the roles kind of defined here, which is to say that the administration is going to propose the budget principles, set overall strategic priorities, produce the budget recommendations, and then receive your feedback. The board's role is to approve budget principles and decision-making criteria, provide input on strategic priorities, clarify expectations on the millage rate, indicate acceptable uses if appropriate, if we end up deciding to use fund balance, and then, of course, approve the final budget and set the millage rate. I'm going to pass it to John to provide an update on the way the budget has evolved since the last time we met.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody again after a couple weeks. So over the past month or so, there's been some pretty significant key changes both on the revenues and expenditure side of our budget. On the revenue side, over time as we gain sort of more clarity on the assumptions that we built into our revenue model, as those things turn from assumptions into facts that we can lock in and build our model based on, we're adjusting our model to be more accurate and to be more precise. And so there's two key adjustments that we want to talk through in the model that have changed our revenue picture. The first one is our QBE revenue adjustment. So a few weeks ago, we got our official QBE allotment back from the state, and we got a little bit less revenue, about 2% less revenue than we were anticipating to get in our initial model. There's a couple factors to that. The first one is enrollment loss, which we did, forecast some of, and then the second piece was changes in the base allotment rate. While our initial model was based on what we've seen in the past from the state in terms of how they fund the base rate, they were not as generous this year as they had been over the past 3 or 4 years. The second piece of the revenue adjustments are some changes to local and state revenue. So the first one is adjusting our delinquent property tax collection assumptions to be more in line with the actuals from the current year. However, what that means is that, as our delinquent property tax goes down, we would expect to recover some of that in the actual digest, meaning people are paying their taxes on time as opposed to us collecting them delinquently. The second piece is an expiration of our pilot program, which stands for payment in lieu of taxes. Generally, a payment in lieu of tax program works as the county or state will offer a certain incentive to businesses to do business in Savannah, and in exchange, they'll pay a fixed fee or some fixed rate for their taxes that is generally more favorable to them than what they would otherwise pay in the tax digest. And so that agreement, or one of those agreements ended, which resulted in a loss of revenue on the pilot side. However, we should expect to recover some of that in the digest as well. But once again, we still don't have our tax digest, so we just don't know exactly what the movement will be as precisely as we'd like to at this point in time. The last adjustment are the expiration of a few key state grants. And so in total, that reduced our revenue revenue projection down by about 2 percentage points, which gives us an updated revenue forecast of about $697.3 million. On the expenditure side, we have also a few updates as well that have impacted the budget. The first one is the conclusion of the MSAP grant. And so the idea is to have continuity and continue to offer the services provided under that grant, and so we would need to reallocate expenditures that were previously funded from that grant over to the general fund. The next piece is some adjustments to the personnel files. We just went through and adjusted our calculations for COLA to ensure they apply to vacant positions as well as individuals' supplemental pay was appropriately captured in the budget. The next one is our financial consultant extension, so our team's extension. Dr. Watts has asked us to stay on through the end of the first quarter of next fiscal year to support leadership transition for a new CFO, other process improvements, and other additional ad hoc analysis as necessary. The last adjustment on the expenditure side is an updated vacancy factor projection. And so we've essentially improved the precision of our vacancy factor assumptions based upon vacancies that we've seen throughout the entirety of this fiscal year, up through May of 26. And so the idea is that we now have data that shows sort of how much we've been able to save in vacancies throughout the course of the year. We've updated our budget projection for next year to be in line with what we've seen this year. And so that would bring our total expenditure projection to about $703.4 million. And as you notice, the expenditure projection as it stands currently is in excess of what our revenue picture currently tells us. And so we've identified about $6.8 million in reductions that will sort of help us present to a balanced budget while also maintaining sustainability for the district. Before I jump, yes.
Hang on. Ms. Grabowski.
Sorry, yeah, I just want to ask a quick question before you jump to the next one. On the QBE allocation, I want to make sure I understood what you said correctly. So the state was not as generous as we were hoping on what they projected our enrollment to be. Is that correct?
So there's two pieces to it. The first one is the enrollment loss,
Yeah.
But the second one is sort of the dollars that you earn per student. And so historically, we've seen the dollars per student increase more than they did going into next year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Campbell.
I have a clarification along the same lines, but on the other end. Is this the first time that we've appreciated a significant enough loss to cite it because of a decline in enrollment? Or has that happened every year that enrollment's declined?
Well, so in the past, your enrollment would decline, but you would still gain more money from QBE than the prior year. And so this is the first time that you've gotten less money than you got in the prior year.
Okay, it's not because do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. So I think the reason that you haven't seen it before is, yes, there's been two things to take into account. One is the dollars per student has gone up enough to offset it, so you never see it as a loss. Because like last year, the dollars per student increased per base unit, which gets calculated across a lot of categories, went up by about 5 times as much as it did this year. So you didn't have that aha moment of the enrollment, even if you're seeing it. The other thing is that most states and states across the country use what they call the hold harmless to soften some of the impact associated with the end of the pandemic and pandemic era enrollment losses and the financial impact there. And so those hold harmless provisions have sunsetted. And so it feels like a lot happening one year, but in reality, we're adjusting to changes that are taking some time to take place.
Understood.
At the same time, last year, this time, the state legislature was more generous with schools than they were this year. So those things come together. I would say probably not coincidentally, right? Because there's fiscal policy decisions being made.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Grabowski.
If you have some kind of something that shows that in a little bit more detail that you could send to us, just to kind of understand that calculation, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So the next thing we wanted to talk through was to sort of explain some of the items that we've identified as reduction opportunities to present that balanced budget while still maintaining, the operations of the school district in a safe, sustainable way. And so these items total about $6.8 million. And so I will walk through each one, but before I do that, I want to highlight in the far right column, we have what's called a refunding priority. And so what we've tried to do is rank these things in a way that shows, if we do end up with a little bit more revenue than what we are anticipating, here is the likely order of things that will be added, or that could potentially be added back to the budget. So the very first item is a COLA reduction. And so initially when we started our conversation, we were speaking of a 3% COLA. The idea would be to reduce this down to 2% COLA, and we believe that will be about approximately $4.2 million. The next item is the data dashboard, and so this is one of the strategic investments that you all have heard about at our budget workshop and at the board retreat. And so this, reducing this from the budget would save about $250,000. The reason that we chose this is because, we wanted to take the community's feedback as well as you all's feedback on, what strategic investments were most exciting, which the community valued the most, and this was one that was lower ranked in priority from the community survey. The next one is for the communications strategy, and so this is another one that was low ranked from the board priority perspective, and so that would save about $500,000. Following that, we have the AI readiness training, which would be staff training on use of AI at work, and so that would save about $50,000, which was another low ranked board priority item. And then the last, the next one is the Chatham Area Transit Program, which provides alternate transportation options or opportunities for students enrolled in choice programs, and that was lower ranked in the community budget survey. Following those items, we have a couple other items that are potentially key reductions as well. The first one is a reduction to the phasing in of transformation professionals, and so the idea is that we understand that these folks likely are not going to start July 1, and there's time before we would need to hire them, ramp them up, and get them going at their schools. And so we believe we can save about $350,000 by phasing that program in. The next one is for a reduction in legal services. And so this one is, I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry, I need you to stop there. Okay.
Ms. Hall?
Talk more about the phase-in that would occur.
Right. So essentially, when we initially budgeted this, we budgeted the positions as full year, right? But knowing that they would not likely start July 1, and we need to incur those costs from the beginning of the fiscal year. And so what this would do is allow us to bake in really a more true cost of what the program would, what the expenses for the program would be, based upon when those folks would actually start working.
So would they begin when the children come back in August?
In the fall, that's correct.
Okay, that's not really the fall, but the beginning of the school year.
At the beginning of the school year, following the summer.
Okay. And would it phase in like early childhood first, second grade first, third grade?
When we say phased in, it's not about the grade level. It's more so just about the timing of when the positions start, if that makes sense. So it's as opposed to budgeting for them for the full year, it's really budgeting for them for the school year, right? As opposed to incurring those or budgeting those costs as if we would incur them in the summertime.
Okay, one last question. Would the persons be hired still in July or June, or would they not be hired until we're actually ready to put them in the classrooms?
So I think it kind of depends on just kind of how the hiring process is for each of the positions shakes out, right? But I think the idea is to do most of that closer to the beginning of the school year.
Okay. Mr. Ray, you agree with that? This is how wonderful it is that Dr. Watts wants one group to talk continuously to the other. So you don't have to worry in finance when it would be, because Mr. Ray will tell us this is when we plan to do it.
Yes, I mean, ultimately, we in Talent and Human Resources want to fill every position. The reality at the start of the work calendar, the reality is we don't and we can't for various reasons. So they're just planning, against my best wishes, which is to be full. They're planning against that, which kind of works because from year to year, just being honest with you, from year to year, we try to get to that point, but the reality is we cannot fill every position by day one. It's going to take some time in August before we get to a lot of the positions and even to September. So that's just what they're planning on.
Well, Mr. Ray, the fact that third grade reading is our North Star, would it be, is it planned that precisely that paras would be in those third grade classrooms or second grade classrooms first because that's our benchmark, or?
I don't anticipate anything stopping us from hiring. I don't anticipate that process doing that. We're just talking about something that naturally happens. We'll be able to fill the positions for the applicants that we have as we're going forward.
And remember, it will be posted as a general para position. The principal really is responsible for assigning paras and teachers to the grade levels that they want them assigned to. That's not, we don't do that. Once the position is posted for that particular school, the principal interviews, the principal hires, and the principal decides the grade level and the placement. That's not a central office function.
Now, Dr. Watts, does that follow the strategic plan if our basic thing is reading and writing, foundational, but we give a principal 3 paras and she puts them in 5th grade? Does that,
So
The
I appreciate
intelligence-
that.
Dr. Bond-
It also is going to be an issue with teachers too, right? So there has to be a balance between consistent prescription and some level of autonomy, right? Some level of principal level decision-making. The hope, though, is that if we're all using our strategic plan as the guide, and every principal knows that one of the first goal that as a district we have to meet is foundational literacy, strategically, they will make the decision to put their resources where the goals are aligned, okay? That is another reason why leadership development, as you heard Dr. Taylor say, is braided throughout. Because while that is obvious to me, it may not be obvious to every principal to do that, right? And so that's why we constantly have to build professional capacity to be strategic decision makers. Yeah. And that is both an art and a science. But no, I would not be as prescriptive as saying you have 3 paras and you must put them in X place. My hope is that our principal supervisors, our chief of schools is providing that level of support and coaching that those decisions get made. And I have confidence that that is what will happen. But no, it is not explicitly stated anywhere. Yes.
well, then Dr. Taylor, I would think in terms of our monitoring, that we look at the schools that put the paras in the foundational grades versus the ones who decided, you know, they needed help in discipline in 5th grade, and see what the outcome is. Let's get that granular so that this time next year, we might be more ready to embed these paras are for our earliest learners.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
know.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Barnes will talk a little bit about kind of how that'll play out.
Okay. And I don't mean to belabor this, but to me, this is the important stuff that can, you know, mess up the great plan because the little things aren't, you know, really defined.
Dr. Howard Hall. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so all things that what Dr. Watts shared, yes, 100% that is our approach. But I do know that, so from a tactical standpoint, so the strategic plan, you know, yes, Board Member Hall, that's what we're going at from a strategic standpoint. But for tactically, right? So as I work with our transformation schools and our principal supervisors, we will be strategizing around the things that you are saying and that you are thinking, right? That we know that we're going to be allocating resources where we know that we can have the biggest impact for long-term student improvement academically. And so that will look like a strategy from small group instruction of how we use those paras in some of those foundational grades. So you won't see it from a high lens here. Now, but from a budgetary standpoint, we know that we will do a pool hiring, just as Dr. Watts shared. Given the number of positions that will show up based off of what is being asked in our budget, we know that it's very well possible on day one that we won't fill 100% of those positions. So, but we do know that we will have the opportunity to fill the mass majority of those. As time passes, we'll be strategic as to where we will see where we can say, okay, this school, you need to hold on hiring 1 or 2 positions versus another school, we need you to fill all of yours. And so, but, we'll have a strategy around that. But from, as what Dr. Watts said, from the superintendent's level and, what she shared, we're going to do all of those things, but that would be the tactical things that my division will be working at to execute.
And remember, this doesn't take the place of our regular paraprofessional allocation. So we've always allocated paraprofessionals to every school. All those schools will still get what they've always gotten. These are additional paras for our transformation schools.
Dr. Howard Hall?
Thank you. Since our transformation schools are all Title I schools, have we taken a look at the Title I plan to see how they are strategically using those funds to actually provide more paraprofessionals?
Yeah, so in this particular case, as you know, we want to avoid the whole supplanting scenario. So what we're focusing on is when they look at their Title I funds, when we do this, and this become their allocation from us, if they want to then fund positions above this, that's when we will have that strategic conversation to say, as a district, we're focusing on K-3. We want to make sure students are have all the foundational things, right? And we want to make sure they're ready to read at grade level by the first grade. They can use their Title I funds then to strategically hire paras or additional teachers at grades 4 and 5. So then they don't have to feel that they're using their Title I funds for those foundational grades, because we'll be funding those at the district level, and then that frees up their Title I funds to be able to do something differently at grades 4 and 5, as you're indicating there.
So the next item is for legal services, and so this is really based on a budget to actuals analysis. We think there's about $1 million that can be reduced from the FY27 budget request. The last item on the list is reduction in the line item for emergency weather funding, and so the idea here is, and I believe this will be an upcoming board item at some point, but the idea here is instead of including this line item in your budget and having to raise taxes or raise revenue from your constituents to fund it, the idea is we could take some small portion of the fund balance and commit, $400,000 of fund balance strictly for this emergency weather set aside, instead of having to raise revenue to cover it next year.
John, before you go on, I just want to, if you'll go back to the previous slide. So we do have a gap that we know we have to fill today, but I want to be transparent, and I think I've spoken with each of you individually, that for the last week, every day, something else is coming to the table that we are discovering, that we also have to add to our expenditures. And so the gap that we need to fill and the reductions that you just heard talked about, that list may need to expand. It's going to strictly depend on what the text digest says to let us know how much of a gap we have to fill. But unfortunately, there have been some daily things emerging that, oh, we forgot about this, we need to put this in, and we just found out about this, so now we got to add this. So this is where we were as of last Wednesday. That is not where we are today. So things have changed even since you got your board packet. Yes, things have changed since I talked to you. Because yesterday we found out one of our school safety grants is not going to be funded, and there are implications for that. So.
Yes, Ms. Grabowski.
On this slide, especially given the ever-changing landscape, and because we don't know what our tax digest is yet, so say it's $1 million more than what we project, would we move back in some of the lower dollar items? It might be lower, so because that first line item, the 4.2, is a much greater amount versus if we get $1 million, then we could move forward with some of the smaller ones, or will that be brought back to the board for consideration? How do you see that process playing out.
And there may be more things added to this list depending on the new expenditures that are emerging daily.
Okay, and for me,
So, right, we will have to, this list, this menu of items may expand, and then we would have to re-rank.
Okay.
Because some of the things that we may have to fund, these are all strategic investments. Some of the things that are emerging are actually more baseline.
right,
And we may have to bring those things back on before we go to one of these things.
I think,
because even seeing this list, like, when we did that initial ranking, it was, kind of
right.
on the spot, and so I think at least for me, seeing this list, I would probably prioritize things a little bit differently than maybe I had done back then, so.
And again, I know you all tell me to start with a budget of what we need. After I've gone through that process now for 2 years, I understand the sentiment behind that, but not knowing your revenue makes it very difficult. You can come up with a lot of things that you need, but when you have the revenue, that really puts a different lens on things. And yes, some of these things may be ranked differently, or you might have a different perception of the budget once you actually know what you're going to get. So for me, you have to look at both things. You can't just put together a budget blindly around what you think you need, and you don't even know how much you have. You would not create your household budget if you didn't have a job.
Right.
You wouldn't do that. You have to know what your paycheck is going to be before you create a budget for your household. So you're right. It changes once you know what the real numbers are going to be.
Just to provide clarity on just one more thing about your question, the cost of living adjustment from 3% to 2% is a big lever, right? You see a whole 1%, you save $4.2 million. That can be used incrementally. You could land on a 2.2% COLA increase. Just one thing to note is that, as a reminder, the cost of living adjustment is in addition to the step adjustment that collectively we feel still matches the actual cost of living or inflation or beats it, and is still an investment in the district's employees. Although in our initial conversations with the board, there was a lot of interest in doing more. So where we're at right now is we've laid out this as an option because we feel like, obviously it helps us meet the obligations of the district. And if we were in a place where the tax digest comes back much more favorably, we still think it'd be nice to fund it, but we don't want to do that at the cost of other programs.
Mr. Katchmar, then Ms. Campbell.
On that note, it would be helpful if we also noted impact on the goals that were being addressed. So one of my questions was going to be, are we still at least meeting inflationary adjustments? And then how do we calculate inflation? So I'm glad you clarified that.
And I'd say two things in our favor there. One is that inflation has cooled a little bit, and that the steps in addition to the cost of living do mean that the average employee's income will keep pace with inflation.
And to the extent this is seen, that information should be here, because right now all we see is, hey, we're reducing your COLA, and staff sees that.
And not the combined impact with the staff,
Right.
Sure.
On a lighter note, my union rep is blowing up my phone about the reduction in legal services budget. That was a joke. Just seeing if people were listening. The only thing I would say there, though, is when you budget for legal, it's kind of like budgeting for workers' comp. You don't know how many claims are going to come up. So we can baseline budget based on, what has our trend been over the last few years. But just know that's not something you could say we're going to commit.
And I think you're right that was the process, right?
Right.
So it had been higher. We expected more claims. This year has been slower. We're just trying to be as accurate as we can be, but it is the type of thing that might require a board item. I mean, if you have a settlement, you have to pay a settlement, right? So we just want to be realistic about it.
It's kind of like our food and nutrition. We guess, but we don't know what.
Right.
And then finally, on a more serious note, here's what I've heard so far about our budget. We don't actually know what our expenses are going to be next year, and we don't actually know what our revenue is going to be. but we have to vote on a budget in our formal regular meeting. So before then, I would love some guidance on, do we really have to vote now? And what happens if we postpone adopting a budget until after June 30th, even though state law says apparently that we have to do that? And I don't need somebody to answer now, but at least before our regular meeting, because I'm really concerned about voting for something.
I think
Yeah.
our intent would be, we were doing everything we can to know the expense side. That's all to be solved within these four walls, the revenue side of it. We just heard, I think it was it Monday or was it Friday? That we heard that they weren't going to get us our digest. And that at that point, we all jumped on the phone, talked through, well, what are options here, right? And if we don't have the digest, the district does have the option to do like a sort of like a continuing resolution that continues funding based on assumptions, but that won't be as precise or as accurate. And so obviously you want to get to a place where you have a final budget based on that. So I know that the district and the legal team are looking into the specific details of how you do that, but there are options.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we don't have digest numbers because of the specific state law change to how we calculate Stevens
homestead
Day
tax
and the homestead
exemptions, yes,
tax
sir.
and all that. So this is not a statewide issue. It's a Chatham County issue.
Well, interestingly, yeah, it is a state law issue, but it only affects Chatham County. Now,
Right.
next year, SB 33 will apply similar effects to every district.
Right,
And
right.
so-
But in terms of our problem right now.
Yes, sir.
It's Chatham County specific. And so in addition to saying to the tax commissioner's office, what do you need from us? Can we collaborate?
Right.
Can we talk about how you're calculating formulas now? Can we be proactive and contact the state DOE and say, listen, we don't have numbers yet, what are our options in terms of not having a budget until we have real numbers? Like, I just want to be proactive so that June 30th, the community doesn't freak out because we don't have a budget and we haven't done anything with the state
Yes.
to at least be proactive.
So I appreciate that push, and speaking with many of you yesterday individually, many of these ideas and thoughts emerged about getting our own interpretation from the state, having our legal department partnering with the tax commissioner's office. I have charged the team with all of those things. But no, I think I shared with you all, I wouldn't have the answer to any of that today. This literally happened on Monday. Yesterday, I was reaching out to each of you, and we were trying to internally figure out what the implications were going to be. But everything that you're stating are things that we are actively working on.
Ms. Campbell?
So one thing I want, just because you brought up the COLA and the steps, we didn't have this conversation, but this is a conversation that I had with many about this. I want teachers to be compensated above and beyond what they would get in other districts so that they want to be here in this district. But I'm so glad to hear you say that, because we paid for a study to make sure that we were compensating well, and we have step programs. And it felt like incentive pay on top of incentive pay when many taxpayers don't get a COLA, right? I mean, they just have to adjust. But one other thing is that I think as I look through these refunding priorities, I get why a lot of them are the new blue sky sort of thinking that we had, and that then we operationalized in a strategic plan, and there are ways that we're going to monitor ourselves, et cetera, like Dr. Taylor's dashboard. Like, I want that too. I really like that kind of data. But I think I get why we started cutting it there. They are really low ticket items, as Ms. Grabowski referenced. I guess one of my ongoing frustrations, and maybe now's the time to say it, is that, we always are asked to determine what we, first, blue sky. What would you like to see? And it's like all of these things. I want all of them. And then you say, but I don't know what number we're starting with, right? And with inflation factored in, and were we even showing efficiency in the way we spent money last year, starting with our budget number? So I don't know if I like these things or not, right? And it's hard to vote on this kind of stuff when we don't see the entirety of the other spending, if that makes sense. It's it's like, which one of these things can you live without? Well, I don't know, because I really want our strategic plan to be successful. But, I also know that, I guess,
Yeah.
predicting money is not the same thing either as justifying spending, right? So like predicting what our budget's gonna be, I think should maybe hopefully become easier and easier with the 5-year strategy and all of that. But I hope that we're still justifying the spending that we're already doing so that we can make room for some of these things.
Those are great points. One thing I just want to share is this puts these changes in the context of the budget we talked about, in the context of mandatory, baseline, and strategic. We just put this together anticipating that question about like what does this mean about where we are spending our money overall. One of the things that the district is expressed interest in doing is starting to challenge some of the things that we've seen as baseline. We assume our baseline, right? We talked about the places where our expenditures vary from what's mandated and what's QBE, and those are the things that are, the big operating decisions about how schools run. How do we staff our schools? How many schools do we have? Those things are big, questions, challenge. And there's a long-term process for, as we talked about a little earlier, doing the sort of benchmarking of departments, and then also looking at the way that those schools are designed and staffed that will yield the opportunity to reinvest into more strategic priorities. But where we're at in the process right now is obviously past the time at which you make staffing adjustments, right? Because, it's June. And the things that we're, changing here are the things that between the combination of the feedback we've received from you, the community, the impact on the students, we A, can change at this point in the process, and B, we think we'll have the least unfavorable impacts. And what we would hope is that over time, as the district gets a clearer picture of what the future operating model looks like, continues down that sort of 5-year trajectory that Dr. Watts talked about, that will provide the bigger levers over time as the financial discipline continues to get better, transparency continues to get better, and we start thinking about how those big decisions are made. That'll provide more and larger levers in the future to invest in strategies, because it does feel like a small strategy investment relative to the big investments, and that's obviously not where Dr. Watts or the district want to be in the 5-year future.
Thank you.
Alrighty, continuing on, the next thing we wanted to talk through is some different scenarios as we await the digest. And so, based on our model, currently, we're assuming about a 5% growth. As we talked about earlier today, we still have not received the digest. And so what we wanted to do is just create sort of a grid so that we can at least understand some different scenarios based on the millage rate and what the actual growth in the digest would look like, and sort of what that would mean for us operationally. Additionally, we also wanted to ground the board and the community sort of with where we stand now and the increases that were, or the requests that we're asking for the 27 budget and how that compares to prior years. And so you all seen this slide before with our old budget number, but after these reductions that we just talked through a few moments ago, that brings us down to about a 4% increase over the revised budget as of April 1st, 2026. And so that would be, over the past few years would be the smallest increase revised to revised over the past few years, but we're still, really consistent and in line with what you've seen last year. Additionally, we wanted to just talk about some of this recently passed legislation and how that would impact the potential for tax revenue. And so we pulled together a conceptual chart. And the way I would really walk through this is I would say, the yellow line in this chart represents a designated millage rate, and the green line represents taxable property values. And so the idea is that, for every, or for whatever the level of taxable property value is, there's some millage rate that can produce either the same amount of tax revenue that you had in the prior year or even more. And the reason that you all have seen that is so in the past, few years, every year you've been able to reduce your millage rate and still gain more revenue is because your taxable property values have grown very favorably and often more than the amount you're reducing your millage rate by. However, as of a month ago, and then on into the future, you have these new pieces of legislation, House Bill 782 and Senate Bill 33, that are going to very significantly restrict the level at which your property taxable value grows. And so what that does is it reduces sort of the flexibility you have with the millage rate to lower it or decrease it and still see the same amount of revenue or more revenue from the prior year that you all have been able to see over the past 4 or 5 years or so. And so as these, laws take place, we'll see it a little bit this year, but next year and beyond, as we get into the future, that's when you'll really start to see the impact of these legislations come together, right? So as your baseline mandatory cost continues to grow, as inflation continues to happen, you'll start to feel a little bit more of that pressure going into the future because you won't see as much growth in property tax revenue as you're used to. Any questions or additional comments there?
And I think the other complicating piece that's not on this slide is you couple that with a reduction in enrollment, which then impacts QBE. Those two things on top of each other. That is why we are, A, taking the steps that we need to take now to be more disciplined so that in the future, as some of these constraints begin to happen, we are well positioned. But it's very complicated when you have not only a reduced enrollment, but you have these legislative impacts that will reduce the amount of revenue. We're going to have to do more with less.
Ms. Campbell and then Ms. Hall.
You just mentioned something about inflation with the pressures of inflation, et cetera. One thing I want the community to hear from us is that whether you like the bill or love the bill, the tax relief bill that was named after us that we're referencing, it does cap the inflationary, the valuation of homes at the inflation rate, which means that we will still collect more revenue. We just won't collect so significant
Yes, ma'am.
revenue.
That's correct.
And that way, it was sort of restraining us from spending
Yeah.
without, justification or discipline or whatever. And that's not a point I'm making. I'm just saying I think that was probably the reason behind the law, and it was voted in. And so hopefully, I want the community to hear the reason this is a problem is, yes, we should be able to predict our spending and stuff, but we just don't know what that value is going to be in order to set a millage rate. It's not that, we haven't shown a little discipline in the meantime trying to get together what it is that we need.
And I think there's two things happening in response, and this is totally disconnected from the delay in getting the digest, which is really administratively a challenge, right? This is the strategic view of where we're going. The voters, the state are, advocating for constrained revenue growth for local governments in the state, including here. And the effect of that is going to be that over time, the base upon which we are able to tax, this board is able to levy a tax, will be constrained in its growth, right? And that's the intent of the law. So what that means is that the district is going to have to keep being more efficient. I think when we started working here last year, we said, wow, you guys have had 8% revenue increases the last couple of years. Nobody gets that, and we're not going to get it anymore either. And that's kind of the point is that revenue increase, that ride that a lot of local governments have been on, and there's been an economic boom, you will continue to generate additional revenue when parcels are added to the tax base, but the existing tax base should move alongside inflation. And so that's going to be an adjustment. And so over time, that means that the district will have to, if you maintain the same if you maintain the same rate, your yield will not increase as much as it has in the past. It's going to affect us a small amount this year with the homes that are eligible, Stevens Day eligible homes, and then over time, because of SB 33, we're going to see more impact.
And I think for us to all know and probably take comfort in as well, it's not it's not just that we're going to be now at the pace of inflation on its own. We're still going to have to always be mindful, as we should have been for years, of what the millage rate is, because at the same rate, you're collecting more taxes every year because of valuation. So in the future, that will still happen. Most homes, hopefully, if they're homestead exempt with Stevens Day or the other, will be capped at inflation, but anything else, any B&Bs, anything else remains like the valuation, it gets taxed at that regardless, and there is no inflationary cap. So we will still collect more in theory.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Ms. Hall?
Okay. I can't speak for anything that happened before 2012, but I can say from 2012 through today, the millage rate has always been a high priority question and decision among this board. We've always spent a lot of time and focus on the millage rate. So it's never been taken as something fluffy. It's been very basic to our thinking. Secondly, I don't know that we have spent enough time analyzing the reasons for our enrollment reduction. Some things, of course, fewer pregnancies in the nation, that's something we can't control. But what are the things that we have any real impact on about enrollment reduction? I'd like us to visit that at some point.
We are. So even as we speak today, there is a strategy in our strategic plan, it's either a strategy or a tactic, where we are exploring why families have left the district. We're going to be interviewing those individuals and getting that data. And so that's one thing. We are studying and analyzing that. We also hope and will continue to work towards an improved perception and trust of the district. So those are some of the other contributing factors why we have students leaving. The Georgia Promise Scholarship, that has to do with the performance of our schools. Only the students get that scholarship when a school is in the lower 5%. So as we bring on transformation, hopefully we have fewer schools that will be Georgia Promise eligible. So those things are being studied as we speak, and will continue to be studied even more around why we are losing enrollment. But it's a combination of things. It's not just declined, people having children. It's a combination of a variety of things.
And I would just highlight, relative to urban district peers, your enrollment loss challenges are not nearly as challenging as, Dr. Watts knows, coming from Houston, they were losing 5,000 to 10,000 kids a year. And, that's a bigger district, but it's not, not 10 times bigger. One other thing just to note is that, there's a demographic shift of who's having kids, how often they're having kids, how old their kids are. And that is a big part of what districts are feeling nationwide. Many districts are also feeling the impact of changes in national policy. Two that stand out in terms of recovering growth is immigration policy affects growth, right? And so the what cities look like changes based on who has the opportunity to be in the country. And so that is, more pronounced in other districts than it is here. The second is the national school choice policy discussion. So I'm sure many of you know that there are many new federal initiatives underway that change the conversation about school choice. The most recent development is under the OBBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. There is a new scholarship program by which public funds Treasury funds can be redirected through reimbursable tax credits to private schools. That's going to keep private schools more competitive. It's going to strengthen and grow private schools. So you have to think about all the things that you can control, but you also have to plan for the dynamics, the demographic changes that you can't control. And so, a lot of that has to do with how do we staff our schools, how many schools do we have, and how do we think about supporting classrooms where the students' needs are changing? Because if you have fewer students, you have to have at some point fewer employees serving them, fewer buildings that they're filling. And those are hard decisions that have to be made that are more in line of a multi-year financial plan like Dr. Watts talked about earlier.
Okay, well, again, I'm speaking about those things that we have any possibility of having an impact on. I would think if this is going to be in the homes of every taxpayer in Savannah, that's a big help for us. Also, anyone who listens to our valedictorians and salutatorians at graduation should be proud of what our products are. I was amazed, I was delighted, I was exhilarated to hear those students speak because I had no idea that we had that kind of brilliance coming out of our schools. So that gives me hope that people who heard those children see what the possibility is, and that because so much of our time is spent on trying to understand what to do for our struggling students, we don't miss the mark of not making sure that we're celebrating and pushing and challenging those students like the ones we heard from at graduation. So a continued analysis, I think, Dr. Watts, of this whole question of enrollment reduction, I think, would be positive for us.
Dr. Hamrow?
Another fact, and I bring it up every time, Chatham County has more private schools than any county in the state of Georgia. And right now, we are competing with athletics because the private schools are recruiting our public school students. Now, it used to be high school, now it starts as early as middle school. So that is why we struggle with football teams in basketball and different sports because of it. So that's another reason why we're losing a lot of our students. We're losing a lot of our athletes to the private schools.
So the next thing we wanted to spend some time touching on was the fund balance and doing a little overview of what our fund balance looked like at the beginning of the year and then where we're expecting to land as we close out the fiscal year. So to start, we wanted to showcase where the fund balance started off at the beginning of fiscal year 26. And so of your fund balance, there's about 5 different categories that your fund balance can be designated into. The first one is non-spendable. So that really refers to like long-term receivables or inventory or things that you can't, that aren't necessarily as liquid. The second group, which is highlighted in purple, is your assigned fund balance. And so this is your fund balance that has been designated for a very specific purpose, for a specific thing. And you all use your assigned fund balance for various uses this year, and we'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. In green, you have your unassigned fund balance. And so that's really your catch-all bucket for everything that's not included in any of the other categories. Then there's 2 other important categories of fund balance that currently are not used. The first one is restricted. And so this is amounts in your fund balance that is really designated for a specific purpose that is stipulated by law, or maybe any other constitutional provisions, or essentially by legislation that are external to the folks in this room. The last piece of fund balance, or last component of fund balance, is your committed fund balance. And we mentioned this a little bit earlier when talking about the emergency weather line item in the budget. And so this section of your fund balance are things that the board decides that the fund balance must be used for. And this is really like your most formal designation for fund balance. The only way to change something that's added to committed is through a formal board vote at the end of a fiscal year. And so this is really sort of that highest level of designation for fund balance that you all can make. Related to your fund balance, there's some key, very important standards, and we're going to show you all where you all stand relative to these standards in a couple slides. But the first one is the board policy, which is that the district must maintain a minimum of 2 months of budgeted expenditures within fund balances, within the fund balance. And then there's also a Georgia code that was recently amended a few weeks back that says that the fund balance cannot exceed 25% of that year's total budget. And so we're going to jump to a slide in just a moment to sort of talk about where we stand relative to those very important standards. Before we do that, really quickly, we just wanted to provide an overview of sort of what this year's use of fund balance has looked like. And so there's about $63 million in assigned fund balance, most of which is for the renovations to 208 Bull Street. And then in green below, we have the current year use of fund balance, which totals to about $23.1 million for various different programs, most notably the $7.8 million for the math textbook adoption that was previously a strategic investment for the upcoming fiscal year. So this slide really shows a waterfall chart of how your fund balance has changed over time, as well as where we stand currently relative to those key standards we talked about. And so, from fiscal year 22 up through fiscal year 25, each year you all are adding very significant amounts to your fund balance. Now, over the past couple of years, or really this year, we've started to eat away at some of that by appropriately spending some of that money. So there's about $200,000 for non-spendable fund balance, the 63 million we discussed on the last slide, and then the other 23 from the current year use. And so that leaves us with about $172.1 million of fund balance, which is comfortably above your board minimum, but also still below the Georgia Code law that sets a maximum at 25% of the total year's budget. And so the other component of this is your maximum board policy, which is about just shy of $300 million. It may be good to consider rethinking what the maximum may look like to make it more in line with the Georgia Code in the future. Are there any questions, concerns, or comments related to the fund balance history?
Ms. Campbell?
I just have one quick question when it comes to the 25 or 15%, whatever it is. Now, the assigned fund balance, do we have dates attached to each of those things, at least in a time frame that would make us compliant with that law so that we're not over the 25%?
So I believe, all the expenditures for the assigned fund balance, my understanding is those are the goals to spend them this fiscal year.
Okay.
And then I believe
Spend
that
the
with the
60
exception
million?
with the exception of the renovations, which was funded as a transfer from your general fund to another fund, where the appropriation can go multiple years.
Okay, so it's out of the fund balance then in that case? Okay.
That 60 million was transferred by board action a few months ago into a project budget.
I remember voting on it. I didn't remember if we left it, though, in the unreserved fund to be used later or if it moved. So it's not there anymore.
It's part of that project budget. Yeah.
Alrighty, I will pass back to Mike to talk about some learnings from the budget process and the opportunities for future improvements.
Right here. Thanks. So, thanks everyone for the great conversation and feedback here. As we've been refining the financial management of the district, working with the team, we feel we've made some significant improvements as part of the 27 budget process. Additional opportunities still remain to enhance district-wide financial management and drive operational efficiency. So what we're doing now is sort of building the infrastructure by which we can pursue bigger and bolder improvement opportunities. And so in FY26 and before, there wasn't much of an ROI framework. We had this expression, I'm not sure you all have heard it, but I'm sure some of you have heard the expression of money in the gray, of just finding a way to pay for a thing, because in many cases we were over planning and then under executing, and we would reallocate funding as a practice rather than as an exception. Now that of course is necessary sometimes, but what we saw when we started here was that was happening by default for certain things. So for example, purchasing vehicles, planning for overtime are things that we know we're going to do. So those are built into the budget now. So you see a top line budget growth that should mean in some cases we're not coming to the board for extra for some of those things, right? So we're trying to improve on that. The district leaders, the cabinet members in particular, have taken a depth of ownership that they previously didn't have to the same degree, and the budget process has become quite a bit more structured. In the past, some of those things were not as true, and we weren't specifically budgeting for capital expenditures and bringing a lot of budget amendments. Where we're at in terms of the improvements right now, which is a little bit broader than just the budget process, but as you've heard, the district's improved its ROI capabilities and continued to invest in using ROI to make resourcing decisions. The enhancements to department budget ownership and accountability. We hope that you're feeling and you'll continue to feel increased transparency both into how the budget is planned, but also how it's executed and monitored so that the reporting is useful, transparent. It's informed by objective analysis. Every piece of analysis that we're doing now is based on looking 5 years into the future. So we don't say, let's sign up for a recurring cost without knowing that cost is what it's going to do into the future. And then there's a justification process for new investments. We've been having, I'd say, fun conversations with Dr. Watts leading, questioning why does this have to be this much? How does it affect kids? Tell me, answer these questions in a way that was not part of the process before. And then we've reduced the reliance on what are called above allotment positions. So you're probably familiar with this term, but in some cases, positions are being added to the budget as an after the fact, or they're being added in exception to the standard staffing model. That practice is a way to solve problems in the moment, but it's not really a good sustainable practice to add FTE that you don't have a lasting funding source for. So we've tried to transition into having all the positions planned for, as many positions possible planned for in the budget process to reduce those above allotments. And we've, I think, benefited from the investment of the cabinet members and department leaders in strengthening their financial acumen and participating much more actively in the process. That's all to say we are only, we've only taken some of the steps on this journey. And, to your question, Ms. Campbell, there are bigger things that this should lead to, and we want to see this lead to. Potential and, future improvement opportunities, including, much more robust use of return on investment. Now that we have the ability to capture our expectations and measure against those expectations, we expect the district will be able to continue to make decisions based on whether ROI is demonstrated. As you know, we've been working, the IT team and with some support from our team, but the IT team and the finance team have been working to strengthen Munis and close a lot of the gaps in Munis so that Munis can be our single source of truth. That is something that has started, but it will not be completed immediately. We think that there's an opportunity to move towards better school level budget ownership and accountability, like what we've seen in the department leaders. And then really look a little bit more broadly at assessing school staffing, adjusting. We've done some preliminary benchmarking to neighboring districts or comparable peer districts in the state and out of the state to understand where our workforce, what our workforce looks like relative to other districts. And we think it's important to continue down that path to understand how the central office organization can evolve over time. So to kind of drill down a little bit further in there and use that type of analysis to plan workforce adjustments in the future. And then improved strategic grants management approach is really critical. I think you've heard Dr. Watts say earlier, we've had some surprises. We don't want to have grant surprises. And so there's definitely an opportunity as you work towards being kind of a world-class financial management. You don't want to have any grant or contract or anything expiring be a surprise, and you want to strengthen your planning around that. And then really important, because the district has in the past relied on savings from other initiatives to improve capital improvements, and they've actually had a significant amount of savings. And then there is also the funding that's associated with the plans in East Blast. We have not had the strongest capital improvement plan for the things that are not East Blast eligible. We think that's an area the district will continue to work on and should continue to work on. And last but not least, really critical if you're going to ask people to do more, you want to be able to differentiate the way that they're compensated when they're excellent. And so undergirding, all of these financial improvement, opportunities is making sure that you have a performance system needed to implement performance-based compensation in the long run. So this is kind of our read of where we're at right now in terms of, the far left is where we were, center is where we are today, and the gray on the far right is where we'd like to see the district go.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
I know it's time for us to go into executive, so I'm going to make this real brief. I'm very hopeful about the interdepartmental cooperation that Dr. Watts keeps talking about, because I think in so many ways our chiefs working with each other and helping and encouraging each other and looking for ways that they can be fruitful will be a big help for us, because to me that's something that was not emphasized in the past. So I'm very happy about that. The other thing is, last month we were talking about security for our phones, and I said, why can't we use East Blast funds to help us with that? No, Connie, no, we can't do that. East Blast will do it. And then Mr. Cashmar lists all the different ways that technology options in East Blast could absolutely help us with that. So I want us to I want somebody, not just off the cuff, to actually go through the East Blast regulations and find any openings for us where we can use East Blast funds that we are not taking advantage of. And I'm willing to bet, just like I bet that we did all this talk about the phones, Denise, and then we ended up with the state telling us what we were going to do. I think if we take the time to look at that, we might find some relief for some of our things. I'm just asking whoever wants to take that on. Probably Dr. Taylor's going to have to take it on. But whoever takes it on, I think it would be fruitful for us.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Thank you. Also, after, being the rep for our 6th through 8th school, the Groves multi-complex, and I see on here it says insufficient budgeting for capital expenditures, but sometimes there's contingency that we have no control of that has cost us millions. So when I look over for the budget process for improvement and see increased financial acumen of department leadership, that's going to be pivotal when we are actually doing all these renovations within our district and building new schools because of things that we have no control of that happens, which actually cause us to have to submit those budget transfers.
That's a great point. I'm looking over my shoulder at Megan here, but as obviously as the district advances its management of this, the best practice is to not be surprised, right? Is to have a facilities condition assessment that says this elevator has 2 years left on it, this roof has 4 years left on it, and to build the whole capital plan around a strong facility condition assessment to try to minimize those surprises, and then designate a reserve specific to, capital contingencies. And sometimes it'll be, 5% or 10% of the planned spend that you set as a contingency. And I'm sure Megan can talk about this a lot more than I can, but I know that's what she's working on.
She doesn't talk now.
Okay. So, just kind of taking a step outside of the budget process and looking at the continuum of progress, we, want to just sort of highlight the progress that's behind us and ahead of us for the district's financial management. This is sort of a standard public sector financial management continuum that we use to evaluate the way that, districts, cities, other organizations perform against key standards. And, we sort of joined the district in a place of emerging capabilities, and Dr. Watts and Dr. Taylor and others taking a key focus on trying to strengthen these things. And we see the district as having improved to improving and on its way to achieving. So where we are now is the processes are being designed to reduce manual tasks, reduce risk, save money. The ERP is getting stronger, but it's not perfect. And, that's pretty typical of a public school district, is to have an ERP that is starting to serve its function well, but can continue to improve. There's standardized reporting, and you all, have seen some of that reporting that comes out of the system, but it's not always tailored perfectly to the insight that's needed at the moment, and doesn't, meet each of those questions and needs. Controls are stabilizing, risk is limited. Traditional finance metrics can be tracked, and where we hope to see the district go in the long run is towards achieving, leading, and exceptional. Exceptional is very rare in the public sector, but the team is very committed and focused, and Dr. Watts and her team are pushing towards moving towards achieving and leading in the next year to 2 years. And we, just kind of use this as our gut check on the way that the things that we're working on that we talked about here match against where the district wants to go in the long run to be an exceptional world-class district. Any questions?
No, we're very pushed for time right now.
Okay, yeah, I'll do this as the last thing I want to cover. Just a reminder, this is where we're at. We're in June.
Notes.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes version is,
There you go.
we have a really good sense of where expenses are going. We're working on strengthening that. The revenue is a big question. As that revenue becomes clearer, we may do things that we don't do at the year end every year because we are cutting it close on knowing what the revenue side looks like. I'm sure you'll hear more from the district.
All right. Any questions? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, and thanks to the finance team for all their hard work on this. We are not doing this. The finance team is leading, and we're happy to be supporting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will now entertain a motion to go into executive session and discuss personnel, real estate, and legal. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay.